Hello and welcome to Talkin with Tommy, a show about officials by an official. Tonight, my guest is retired NFL official Jim Tunney. Jim officiated with the NFL from 1960 to 1990, receiving 29 postseason assignments, and is still the only referee to work consecutive Super Bowls. On top of being a highly successful official, off the field he is an accomplished educator, superintendent, author, motivational speaker, and founder of the Jim Tunney Youth Foundation. Jim, welcome to the show.
Tommy, nice to talk with you, and great to be with you. How are things back in Virginia?
Oh, it's a little bit cool this time of year. It should be in the 80s, but we're in the 60s and sometimes 50s, and it's kind of cold and wet.
Yeah, we're having that kind of sort of in and out weather pattern as well.
Great. So this is actually our second time meeting. The first time I met you was back in the early 1990s. Shortly after you retired from the NFL, you started on the speaking circuit, and you came and spoke for my local area Chamber of Commerce annual banquet.
Yes.
And I just remember meeting you back then. And when I was in high school, I wanted to be a football official. And I remember your trademark touchdown where you raised your hands with your fist clenched and your fingers up at the end of the touchdown. I always thought when I was like 16 or 17 years old, that was the coolest thing.
It just occurred to me naturally. I never planned it or thought about it. You did it one time. I thought, well, I keep doing that. That was all.
So how did you get your start in officiating?
You know, my dad was an official. You probably knew that. And he did high school and college. And actually he did 1 year in the All-America Conference in the early 50s before it folded. But I never thought about being official. I thought I'd just go to the games with my dad. I would go to him. I went to a game with him one time, and he was officiating Pasadena Junior College and played in the Rose Bowl, and I was sitting on the bench, and the kid sitting next to me was named Jackie Robinson. And he came over to me one time. He said, "You watch this little kid, number 28. He's going to be something someday." Nobody knew Jackie in those days, but he was a great kid, and I liked officiating. I liked going with my dad. I'd carry his bag into the Rose Bowl or the Coliseum or someplace. And then when I get to college, they had a Student Officials Association, and they didn't pay you anything because you're still competing in college, but I got some experience there. And when I graduated from college, I joined the Southern California Football and Basketball Officials Association. They're paying, high school football is paying $12.50 a game. I thought, you know, if I worked 3 high school games in a weekend, make $37.50, boy, I'm home free. It was great. It was great money and a great opportunity. Never thought about advancing too far, but as I was in officiating and went to high school and junior college, small college, and then to what they now call the Pac-12, which is called the Pacific Coast Conference, and USC, UCLA, Cal, Stanford, people like that. I really enjoyed that, and I never applied to the NFL. They came along and asked me in 1960 if I wanted to be in the NFL. I never had thought about it much, but I said yes and joined it and loved every minute of it.
Let's talk a little bit about that in your journey to the NFL. You know, today's journey to the NFL for officials is, they start out in high school, work college ball, they have to get into the development program, and then they go into the NFL. So when they came and sought you out, were you still able to work in the NFL and do college games on Saturday, or how did that transition work from the college level into the NFL?
Oh, that's very interesting because I never applied. I was doing Pac-12 called Pacific Coast Conference, and I did a couple of intersectional games in the Coliseum, and evidently they saw me because that was also the year, if you remember, Tommy, that's the year 1960 when the AFL started. And the AFL had a supervisor named Bob Austin, who was a former NFL official, and Bob called me and said, "We're interested in you in coming in the AFL." And I said, "I never thought about it, Mr. Austin," but he said, "No, I want to come out to Southern California and interview." And 2 days later, Mike Wilson from the NFL called and said, "I hear you're talking to the AFL. Don't sign anything. We're coming out. We want to talk to you too." I had both offers from AFL and NFL, and I could still work in those days, the early 60s. I could work the NFL game on Sunday, and then I could work a high school game on Friday night. Couldn't work a Saturday game because that's when we traveled. But I did some Thursday night games and Friday night games. And then along about 1963 or 4, the NFL said, "No, there's difference in the rules between high school and college and the pros, and we don't want you to get confused with rule enforcement, so stop working those games on. I said, well, I'm going to work once a week. That's not enough for me, but it was, and it worked out fine. And it was a great idea, because you do need to focus and study and study and study the NFL rules, because there's so many nuances in the NFL game that you overlook easily if you're not right on top of every minute of it.
So, back in the early days, how was it like booking travel and getting there for pregame? Was it the day before, the day of? I'm guessing it was a lot different compared toward the end of your career.
Much different, and much different than it is today. On Tuesday, we would get a telegram. A telegram where I live would come into a local rent-a-car office, and the lady would call me and say, you have an assignment Sunday, Baltimore at Cleveland at 1 o'clock, and the crew is such and so. So we get the telegram on Tuesday, and then Saturday we'd have to travel. The good news about early days, it was just a great opportunity for me. We didn't have a lot of meetings and a lot of crew conferences before the game. And Pete Rozelle was the commissioner. I worked 29 years for Commissioner Rozelle, and he was just terrific with officials. What a wonderful man! And he insisted. We didn't rebuke him, but he insisted that you travel first class. So we traveled first class. So I would get on an airplane Saturday morning in Los Angeles and fly from there to Baltimore or Cleveland or someplace, and work the game, and then come home Sunday night. But with first class air travel, didn't pay a lot of money. We didn't. I think our game fee at that time was $250 a game, which is nothing compared to what it is today.
And I'm assuming the league paid for your travel back then.
League paid for the travel and paid you per diem for your meals. You had to buy your own dinner, your own breakfast. You get a meal on the airplane going to and from, but the other meals you had to pay for, and incidental, sure.
So what was the NFL like at the beginning of your career, and then what was it like when you retired?
It was so different. I was so happy when I joined in 1960 to meet people. I stood behind Bart Starr and Johnny Unitas and these guys that I'd watched from television before, and saw all the great games and the wonderful players. And there was a good friendship among players and officials. We could joke with them and have fun with them, and it was serious, and it was a business for them. I can remember working a Pro Bowl one time, and Pro Bowl was held in Los Angeles, and there was a pass interference. I was a field judge when I first started. There was a pass interference by an offensive guy against a defensive player named Maxie Bond. Maxie Bond played for the Eagles and the Rams, and I didn't call a foul, and I should have called a foul. And Maxie was yelling and screaming at me, and I said, Maxie, come on. It's a Pro Bowl, for God's sake. Don't worry about it. He said, don't worry about it. He said, if we win, we get $800. If we lose, we only get $5. I want to win. So, but it's fun. We could joke back and forth with the players a lot. That was a great time.
Nice. So let's talk a little bit more about officiating wise. So, feedback is really important to officials now, and, getting written reports and whatnot. And, I've heard that NFL officials now, after their game on a Sunday, on like a Tuesday, they will get a, their report that tells them how they did and their feedback. When you first started, how was feedback compared to when you started, when you ended, and how did that kind of evolve over the years?
Television made it happen. Media made it happen. When it first started, we worked the game on Sunday, and maybe on Tuesday, Art McNally, who was the supervisor at the time, or one of his assistants, Jack Reeder or Nick Scorch or somebody, would call you and say, there was a play in the third quarter, third down, 14 to go, so. What did you see? There was no call on the play, but what did you see? They didn't criticize you. They wanted to know what you were seeing, and they were seeing on their television screen back in the office. Now, they didn't have the television they have today. They had just a small screen like you and I are talking on. But today they have a screen the size of your wall and your back behind you. And it's much more technical today and much more video today than it is then. And we didn't have replay. We didn't start Cruise until 1967. Before then, I would work, and I loved it. I was a field judge for my first 6 years. I would love going to. I would work with great referees. People, Tommy, you've never heard of Bill Downs and Ron Gibbs and George Rennicks and Bud Brubaker and Norm Schachter. People nobody ever heard of. They weren't as popular as they are today. And they worked with different referees my first 6 years. So I watched how a referee ran the game, ran the crew, and what they demanded from the other officials. So when I became a referee in 1967, and I had a good running start at what you do in the crew, it's much more different today because now, probably in about 1966 or 67, they started the videotape stuff, and they would come in the locker room and give you, nowadays, they come in the locker room after the game, and you get a video disc of that game, and you can put it in your laptop to get the Microsoft Surface, and they put it on a laptop, and then you watch the game while you're flying home. So you're watching the game all the time. People say people ought to have full-time officials. Well, they're full-time in their study of the game. They don't work every day, but like basketball or baseball people do. But the videotaping now demands that you look at that tape all the time.
So, well, let's talk a little bit about rules. What significant rule changes did you see over the years that really made a difference in how the game was played and how it evolved?
One of the most important that I thought happened in 1978, Art McNally asked me to give rules talks to the people on the West Coast where I live. So I did the Chargers and the Rams and the Cowboys who train out here in Southern California. And then when Seattle came, I was doing Seattle and 49ers and Oakland, all of Oakland with Madden and people like that. But I remember doing a Seattle Seahawks game in 78. I was talking to the coach, and you may not remember the name, Jack Patera. Jack Patera said, Jim, we can't let them have blockers with their arms there. We've got to allow blockers to push, use their hands. I said, Jack, that's foreign to the game. You block with your shoulders. He said, you can't block Lawrence Taylor with your shoulders. You got to be able to use your hands and push hard. And he was right. So we changed the rule to allow offensive people to use their hand not only behind the line of scrimmage, but downfield. You'll see a receiver down there blocking for another receiver after he catches the ball, and you'll see him push him with their hands. You couldn't do that before. You had to block with your shoulders. A big rule change was use of the hand. Of course, a lot of rule changes made the game better. They've opened the game up now. We lost a good friend of mine recently, Don Shula, and he was involved in what we call the bump and run. At the time I started in the NFL, receiver coming off the line of scrimmage could be contacted by a defender any place downfield, unless the ball was in the air. But once we came to the bump and run, we allowed a defensive player to contact we call him chuck, to chuck the receiver within 5 yards. You can chuck him once. You can't hold on to him. You can't ride him, but you can push him one time and then let him go. Once they get beyond 5 yards, you can't touch them. And right now, we're seeing a lot of what we call tactile contact. Defensive guy, offensive guy, touching each other, they run down the field. Well, they've allowed that in the last several years, and it's really tough to call on downfield officials. Side judge, back judge, tough to call for people downfield like that.
So, well, you mentioned you were a field judge for your first 6 or 7 years in the NFL. What were you before the NFL? Were you a field judge then, or were you a referee?
In the college and high schools, I was a referee most of the time. In fact, I worked in the Pacific Coast Conference. I was referee. The interesting part was we had 5 really good college referees when I was coming up. And I started in the colleges when I was 25. So I got lucky there and working with some good referees and learning from them. But then when I started the NFL when I was 30 years of age, I had a good running start for the college officials that I worked with.
So, well, crew sizes really have varied over the years. I mean, we've gotten to the point now where we have 7 officials on the NFL level, 8 officials in the college level. When you started out in the NFL level, was it 5 on the field? So
we had 4 in college, but 5 in the NFL.
So how was the adjustment to that, the creation of mechanics, figuring out who watched what? How did that all evolve?
Well, it was interesting because I thought working with five officials, they still had 22 guys on the field, Tommy. They got 11 offense and 11 defense. We only had five officials. And I was really just to look for receivers coming downfield. Now, as you remember, in those days in the 60s, the Lombardi 3 yards in a cloud of dust, they're running the ball a lot more. Now they're throwing it with five receivers. When they came up with five receivers all going downfield, we moved to the sixth official. And the sixth official was important. We worked a game Oakland and Pittsburgh Steelers in Oakland one time, and a guy named Jack Tatum hammered Lynn Swan as he came across the middle, and we didn't get it. We missed the foul because there was no line judge. So we put a line judge on the field, and his job was look at the line of scrimmage, offense and offside or encroachment. But then once the ball is snapped, look behind there in the linebacker's position and watch that position there and see what happens. That's what we had the sixth official come in. And then we moved down to the seventh official. Colleges now, are using 8, and the NFL has experimented with 8. Haven't gone to it yet, but I think 7 officials is adequate. We have 5 receivers. We've got 5 people downfield, head lineman, line judge, side judge, back judge, field judge. Those 5 officials are responsible for those 5 receivers. So they have what they call the keys. They watch the receiver come off the line of scrimmage, and you pick this particular one. For example, if you're a side judge, you have the wide receiver on your side. You pick him up and won't follow him. So 5 receivers on 5, 5 officials on 5 receivers and 5 defensive guys is pretty much adequate for me. I don't think we need the 8th official.
So let's talk about a couple of other changes in the game. In 1975, they decided to mic you guys up so you can communicate with the stadium. So that college wasn't even doing that at the time, correct?
No, we started. The NFL started, but I was against that. I didn't think it was fair to come on the microphone and say number 77 holding until everybody in the stadium who was holding. I mean, you embarrassed the guy, and I didn't like it, but they did it because the sports writers in the booth, they're the ones who caused it. It was the media. They wanted to know who the foul was on and what foul it was. So they wanted to announce it. So one of the first times I had that, I was in the Coliseum in a preseason game, and there was a holding, and I said, turn the microphone on, looked up at the camera, and I said, holding number 77. 2 plays later, I got a foul on 77 holding again. I said, holding number 77 again. And I didn't like him to say that. If you want to embarrass the guy, I'll embarrass him for you. But I didn't think it was necessary to embarrass the player. Sometimes they players hold because they don't really want to. They just have to do it to protect the quarterback or something. So I thought it was an unfair thing. But a microphone has been very, very helpful and very useful. And you can remember, maybe we'll talk about it a little later, is the Fog Bowl. When we had the Fog Bowl in Chicago, the announcer couldn't see, the PA announcer could not see the field, could not see the game. And I knew he couldn't because Terry Bradshaw, doing the broadcast on television, came down the field. And I said to him, what are you doing out here? He said, we can't see from up there. So I picked it up, and I picked up the microphone, and I had it on. I would just say, 3rd and 4 on the 38-yard line. I announced down and distance for the whole second half.
Wow. So did you even expect to do that day? You just kind of walked out on the field?
Never thought about it at all until I thought, well, who are we missing here? We're missing the fans at home. We're missing the fans at the stadium. They can't see the game. Let's give them a chance. And so I just figured somebody had to do it, and the announcer couldn't do it, so I did it. Didn't get paid for it, but I did it anyway.
So how far could you see on the field during the Fog Bowl?
It was good on the Fog Bowl, and as you know, the first half was brilliant, good weather and everything fine. But the fog came over Lake Michigan, over the stands, over the bleachers, and we walked on the field. The second half was quite foggy, and I could see probably 50, 60 yards. And then from time to time, it would go blank out. You could see the goalposts from time to time, but sometimes you couldn't. But before we started the second half, and if you don't mind, we'll talk about that Fog Bowl. I went to Buddy Ryan, who was coaching the Eagles, and to Mike Tisch, who was coaching the Bears, and I said, what do you think? But he said, listen, the fog is the same side, same on both sides of the ball. Let's play. Let's play. So they wanted to play. The players wanted to play. Some of the players complained about it. The complaint came after the game for the team who lost, and that was the Eagles. We shouldn't have played. But when you lose, you want to find any excuse you can. That was one of their excuses. But it was the football was played from sideline to sideline, and only maybe 10 yards on one side of the line of scrimmage and 10 yards on the other. You don't need to throw the ball 40 or 50 yards. In fact, Tommy, Randall Cunningham, the quarterback of the Eagles, set a new passing record of 404 yards that day. That was a record for him, and so it was fine. It was a good game, and we could talk more about it. But it was an interesting game to work because everybody asked me about the Fog Bowl.
Well, if you want to go ahead and talk about the Fog Bowl, you can.
I was thinking that people. I got an email from a guy the other day that said, "Why did you let the game go on? You should have stopped it." Well, first of all, it was December 31st. It was a Saturday night. The next day on Sunday, the NFL was playing two more NFC's AFC games. So we couldn't play the next day because there were already two games going on. We couldn't play that on Monday because the colleges don't. January 1st was a Sunday, and the colleges won't play on January 1st. They moved their January 1st game to the next day, January 2nd, which was a Monday. So if you couldn't play Sunday and you couldn't play on Monday, you'd have to play on Tuesday. And whoever won on Tuesday had to play the following Saturday or Sunday. And that's too short a time for a playoff game like that. So the players didn't mind it. We got along fine, and everybody was fine about it. After the game, I was going to change my uniform, and Joe Brown, the vice president of communications, called the locker room and said, don't change. The television wants to talk to you. So I went live on television. First time they interviewed an official live on television following the game under the stadium seats in Chicago. And Jim Gray of NBC asked me if I could do an interview with him on NBC, and I did. And he said, and I know Jim Gray for years, and he said, Jim, I was standing on the sidelines. I couldn't see the end of the field. How could you do it? I said, Jim, that's why you're a reporter and I'm a referee. I can see the whole field.
Well, let's go back a little bit. Let's talk about 1986. Replay entered the game.
Replay started in 1986. You say. I say it started in 1978. In 1978, I watched a game between the Buffalo Bills and Dallas Cowboys in Texas Stadium. I got to the airport in Dallas. I was getting on a bus, and I saw Art McNally, supervising officials, and Norm Schachter, a retired referee, that were at Dallas. I said, what are you guys doing here? They know we're just looking at the game. What happened is Tex Schramm had invited them to come, and in the booth, they were looking at instant replay in 1978 to see if it could be possible to use it during the game. He said, we're not going to interfere with the game. We're just going to watch and see how quickly we can pull up a camera, load a film or replay or something to see whether it was possible to use it or not. And so it took from 1978 to 1986, 8 years, while the competition committee and the owners studied it. A lot of people didn't like it. When it first came in, people didn't want the replay. This is not this. They're purists. They want to just play the game. If a mistake is made, don't worry about it. Just play the game. And it took them 8 years to finally say, let's use the instant replay. And when it came in, Tommy, I was in favor of it. I thought, if it'll get a play right, I don't want to go home and say that a call that I missed cost the team a game or a score or anything like that. Let's get the thing right all the time. And I was in favor of it. I've changed my mind a little bit now. We're overusing it too much. We use it on everything. And now that I hope they change it, now that we had the Rams-Saints game and a couple years ago, where we had a call that was missed, it was very blatant pass interference, should have been called. Those things are going to happen. Now they changed it so a coach can challenge the defensive or offensive pass interference. I don't like that. Leave it alone. Let the official call it. If they miss it, they miss it. Quarterbacks throw interceptions. Guys miss blocks. Guys miss tackles. People make mistakes. Officials are going to make mistakes. No question about it. We don't want to. We want to get it right every time, but sometimes there's a mistake. It's going to happen. Let's just play the game.
So, well, cool. Let's talk about one of your other famous games. It's let's say it's probably December 30th, 1967, and you're getting ready to leave your home. They head to Green Bay. Uh, did you have any idea it was going to be 15 below with a wind chill of 48 below when you got there?
I had no idea that I was going to work the game. It was my first year moving from a field judge to a referee, and rookie officials don't usually get a playoff game. And I was a rookie referee. Norm Schachter was refereeing the game. Norm lived in Los Angeles. I lived in the Southern California area. We flew to Green Bay together. We'd fly from LA to Chicago, and Chicago on the Republic up to Green Bay. And we were right there the night before, the Saturday night. We went out to dinner. The crew of there were 8 of us, 6 officials on the field, and Pat Harder and myself as the 2 alternates. I was stationed on the Green Bay Packers side. But the night before, we went to dinner, the 8 of us, and the moon was out. Things were fine. No snow, no anything. I woke up in the morning and the snow was just blowing. It was just horrible. I've got Southern California blood. I'm a thin blood. I get cold fast. I didn't have any gear. I had just my uniform. I didn't have long johns or anything. So the 8 of us went downtown Green Bay before the game, early morning, after mass, went downtown, knocked on the door of the Army Navy store. Now it was December 31st, so the guy was there doing inventory. Had it not been the 31st, there'd been nobody in the store. And we knocked on the door, and the guy said, "Go away, I'm closed. Go away." He said, "Hey, we're the officials for the game. We need help." He finally let us in. We bought gloves, we got underwear, we got long johns, we got face masks, we got everything we could to cover ourselves up. I was wearing 2 pair of long johns, 3 pair of gloves, and my job on the sideline was to keep track of down and distance. So I was standing Coach Lombardi most of the time, except during timeout, when they had the heaters on the sideline, I'd go over and stand with my fanny next to the heater and try to get warm back up. I was in line because the players were standing over there too. When his offense was off the field, Bart Starr was standing over there. Zeke Barkowski was over there. Paul Horning was over there. I tried to crowd by Wendy so I could get warm back up. It was really cold. I've never seen a game that cold before. And the players played the game. The field was frozen. They've had a heater under the field to warm up the field. Didn't work. The field was frozen. So you saw people slipping and sliding, running backs trying to turn the corner. Chuck Messine scored a touchdown for the Packers and turned the corner and slipped and fall and all that. Of course, if you weren't knocked down by a defender, why you could get up and run, and he did. And it was an interesting game that you remember it happened, what now, 53 or 4 years ago? People still ask about a game over half a century ago.
So we got a couple other games here to talk about. Do you want to let's talk about what was your first Super Bowl like? I mean, getting the call to say you're doing the Super Bowl and getting that honor, because a couple of the honors for the Super Bowl, I mentioned you're the only referee to do consecutive Super Bowls, but you're also the last referee to actually flip a coin for a Super Bowl. No other referee has flipped a coin for a Super Bowl since you. So,
thank you, Tom. The first Super Bowl was Super Bowl VI, and I became a referee in 1967, and Super Bowl VI was played in 1972. And I got a call from Art McNally on Tuesday of that week. Maybe it was Monday, could have been Tuesday though. He called and he said, "You got it." I said, "What?" He said, "You got it." I said, "Got what?" He said, "You got the Super Bowl." That was his way of just saying it to me. I said, "Well, that's an exciting time for me." He said, "It'll be in New Orleans, and we want you to arrive on Thursday night. That's only 2 days away. Thursday night, and we're staying in such and such." And that night, for some reason, I got a cold. I don't know how I got a cold. And one of the guys in our crew was a pharmacist, so I said, "What do I take?" He said, "Well, take this as have a penicillin drug." And I got a rash all over my body that night. And he said, "Put Epsom salts in a bathtub and sit in the bathtub and it'll go away." And it did. But the next day, the Super Bowl was played between Dallas Cowboys and the Minnesota Vikings in Tulane Stadium. It was not in the Superdome. Superdome had not been built yet. So it was outside on January 9th and January 16th. It was 29 degrees, cold. And here I had a cold all night, and I wasn't feeling all good. Anyway, 29 degrees, played outside in Tulane Stadium. And a couple of interesting things. Bob Greasy, the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins, set a new record for being sacked behind the line of scrimmage, 29 yards. And Coach Shula is always kidding him about the Super Bowl record he was of being sacked 29 yards behind the line of scrimmage. And I had film showing that it happened. But it was a good game. It wasn't exciting. Of course, Dallas beat them. Landry's first win as the Super Bowl. Roger Staubach was a quarterback. But Shula went into the locker room after the game, I'm told, and said to these guys, I want you to feel right now how you feel. You feel just terrible. We've lost this game. I don't want the feeling ever to happen to any of us again. And the next year, the Miami Dolphins won 17 in a row. And I told Shula, I said, it wasn't for me calling the game when you lost it. You'd have never set that record that still stands today. So Coach Shula and I, who we lost just a month ago, just the beginning of this month, we've had a wonderful friendship together and done a lot of things together, speaking on cruises and things like that. And we've been very, very good friends. But Super Bowl VI was an exciting game for me, being the first referee. I was 42 years of age. I was probably the youngest referee ever for the Super Bowl, and it was a great time for me. And I love New Orleans.
So I got the opportunity with another gentleman on Facebook. We talked to Joe West on Monday. One of the questions we asked him, and I'll ask you, memorable players who really stick out in your mind over your tenure.
I don't think your telecast today is going to last that long. I've got too many of them. When I first started, I could stand behind Bart Starr, John Unitas, John Brody of the 49ers, all the quarterbacks, Bradshaw, you name it, the quarterbacks from the 60s to the 70s. And Tommy, those are the best years. Those are wonderful years to be with players. And Joe Namath, and Terry Bradshaw, Roger Staubach, they've been just such wonderful people to me over the years, and really good friends in all the things that they do. But it was such an honor for me to be on the same football field as the guys who made the game, who made this game what it is today. The first 100 years of it. I've been with the NFL now for 60 years. I started in 1960. It's 2020 now. 60 years I've been associated with the NFL, and I love it. So I just, there's not enough. Gale Sayers, I worked with Jim Brown. When Jim Brown first 2 years he was in the league, I was a field judge, and I was in Cleveland Stadium. I can see Brown come off tackle like that, fake the linebacker out, and come running down the field, and he'd running right straight at me. And how can you beat something like that? How lucky have I been to see all those guys and watch them come and go? So, yeah.
So before the show tonight, we talked about some guys you grew up with in California that you started officiating with.
We did. A couple of guys that have done pretty well in there. They've retired for now, unfortunately, but they both passed away. But Doug Garrison and Doug Harvey and I started working high school basketball games in the early 1950s in Southern California. We all lived in Southern California. Doug actually was in San Diego, but he came up and worked a lot of Southern California games. And we've done a couple of radio shows with the fact that Daryl Garrison went to, I said Doug, but Daryl Garrison went to the NBA. Doug Harvey went to the Major League Baseball, and I went to the NFL. It was really great to see guys that I grew up with going to and be such stalwarts in what they did with Doug Harvey. Everybody, they called Doug God, because he would never take anything from anybody. He was right all the way in. But he was a wonderful man, and I was sorry to lose him just a few years ago.
So, in the intro to the show, I kind of talked about, off the field, some of the things off the field. So let's talk about off the field because, a lot of people know about you and officiating football. They don't understand the great educator that you have been as well. I mean, while you were working in the NFL, you got a PhD. You were a superintendent of a school system. You wrote some books. Um, Talk a little bit about your off the field time.
I've been lucky. I've been fortunate in the things I've done. I started in the graduate of Occidental College as a physical education major and taught PE and driver education as they taught in the schools in those days at Lincoln High School in East Los Angeles. I was at Lincoln High School for 13 years. And in the 1960, when I started the NFL, I was still with Lincoln High School. And I worked a game in Washington, D.C., and it was so bad the snowing. The game lasted 1 hour and 58 minutes. And I couldn't get out that night to get back. I wanted to be back at school by Monday morning. I couldn't get out. I had to stay in Washington, D.C. And probably the only day I missed the school. But I became a teacher and a coach, coach football, basketball, and baseball at Lincoln High School. And then when I went to move on in education, I became an assistant principal, then a principal at Fairfax High School in the 60s, a principal of Hollywood High School, the Hollywood High School on Hollywood Boulevard, and Franklin High School, 3 of them in Los Angeles. And school building, I got there at 7:30 in the morning. School started at 8:15. I got there at 7:30 in the morning, and I would last until maybe 5, 6 o'clock at night, fighting traffic in and out of living not in LA, but in suburbs. So I would be at school from say 7:30 to 6 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday. And Saturday morning, I'd drive to LAX, Los Angeles Airport, and fly to a game in Detroit or Green Bay or Miami or someplace. And Sunday night after the game, say 6 o'clock, I get a 6 o'clock flight in New York City and fly New York to Los Angeles, a 6-hour flight, get in at 9 o'clock at night, get my bags and get home by 10:30 or 11, and then get up and go to school in the morning. So it was a 7-day-a-week job, and I loved being a high school principal. I moved from there to a school superintendency in Bellflower, California, and enjoyed having a little more freedom. And I left the Bellflower in 1978 to be a full-time professional speaker. I would speak. I don't. Excuse me. I don't like the term motivational. Mostly inspirational. I try to give people ideas of how they can be better at what they do, and that's when I started writing books. I've had the opportunity to write 13 books in the last 30 years, and it's been a great opportunity for me. The last book I wrote was called The 101 Best of Tunney Side of Sports. I write a weekly newspaper column every Monday. I have wrote one today for next Monday. Every Monday in the local newspaper, the Tunney Side of Sports is column, and it goes out on constant contact to several thousand people. And it's through my website, jim@jimtunney.com, jim@jimtunney.com. And I'm an educator. I'm a teacher. I've been trying to teach people for years about how they can be better at what they do, and at the same time looking how I can be better at what I do. So it's been a great opportunity to write the books that I've written. I wrote Chicken Soup for the Sports Fan Soul with Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen. I wrote a book on Herm Edwards. Herm Edwards, the head coach of the Arizona State Sun Devils now, and when he got the job as the head coach of the New York Jets in 2001, I've known Herm since 1980. We're good friends. We do a lot of things together. And when he, a little kid from Monterey, California, who was shining shoes at 4-door when he grew up, mowing lawns with a borrowed lawnmower for $1 a lawn, and now he became the head coach of the New York Jets. I thought, you got to tell us this guy's story. So I did. I wrote the book called "It's the Will, Not the Skill," which is Herm's term. It's the will, not the skill. All players have the skill, but the people who make the difference, who get into the Super Bowl, who have Super Bowl mindset, have the will, not necessarily just the skill.
So prior to the interview, I polled some people on Facebook to see if they had any questions for you because we have several viewers on Facebook tonight. So the first one comes from Brian Harrell. He asks, "What are your thoughts on recruiting of new officials and the officials crisis?"
Brian, thank you. The official crisis is really uh, trying to get enough officials to work. We don't have enough officials in the high school level. We can always get officials in the pro level. Everybody wants to work in the NFL. Nobody wants to just stay in high school all the time. Oh, there's some wonderful, wonderful officials I've known who've worked in high school football, basketball, baseball for 40 years, and they're wonderful people. But that's how you start. Start at the little league level. Of course, with this coronavirus stuff, it's tough with sports now, but start at the high school level, the upper to junior college level, to the college level, and then if you work in the college level, try to work in the position of referee, the guy with the white hat, because he's the one that they're going to see most of the time, and you get recognized, get a chance to work in the NFL as an official. So, but you start. It takes a lot of work, takes a lot of effort. They're paying better money in the high school and the college ranks now, and the NFL is playing pretty good right now. Not all that it should be, but they're playing awfully good. But it's a level game. You can't play all your life, and so how do you work with the best people in the world? And I've said that many times. How do you like go to work and work with the best people in the world at what they do? And that's what I did for 31 years. The NFL worked with the best people in the world at what they do.
So I'm going to move down my question list a little bit because I think this question kind of follows that one. Jennifer Calhoun asks, on new officials, what is the one thing you would tell the new officials to focus on when they're first getting started?
Study the rules. Know the rules better than the coaches and players and sports writers and anybody. You have to know the rules, and not just the technical words in the rules, not just the rule book itself, but the spirit of the rule. Why do they have a holding penalty that's 10 yards? Why do they have an offside? What you're looking for downfield? What does the rule say that you can do and can't do as a defensive receiver, a defensive quarterback or safety? Know the rules and know the spirit rules. Why did they write that rule? That was a good thing. As I mentioned earlier, I worked with a lot of referees. Everyone has a field judge. I worked with 5 or 6, 7 really good referees. And I would ask them, why do we have this rule? Why do we have that rule? And learn not only what the rule means, but what the spirit of the rule does. And you can become a better official when you do. Study the rules over and over and over. Look at positioning. Look at how officials are on the field. See what their posture is when a coach yells at them. Do they get all upset? Do they handle it? How is their personal posture? I call it personal power, not position power, not the fact that, hey, I'm the referee and you got to pay attention to me. No, just the fact that I know what I'm doing and I know how to do it well.
Carl Vaccaro, he asks, what is the most difficult situation on the field that you had to overcome as a crew chief?
Probably the fact that when I first started, Tommy, Carl, as a 30-year-old kid working with some of these great, wonderful players and people like a Wade Tittle or a Unitas or a Star or people like that, I asked myself one time in the Coliseum, and I can remember standing in the middle of the Coliseum. When I grew up in Los Angeles, worked a lot of games there in high school and college, and I thought, am I good enough to be out here with these guys? Am I really that good that I can be on this field with those great athletes like that? And I had to say, yes, you're good enough. You deserve to be here. But one of the situations that occurred that we never ever planned on, and I was given a lot of credit for, probably given too much credit. We had a Houston Oilers. Remember when we had Houston Oilers? Houston Oilers played the Cleveland Browns in the dog pound in Cleveland, in the old municipal stadium. And we did not call a pass interference against Houston on a pass interference for a pass to a Cleveland Browns receiver. And the dog pound threw bottles and cans and everything, broken bottle, in onto the field, in the end zone. Now we have a touchdown, and we got to get a kick extra point. I can't let them kick the extra point with all the debris in the end zone that way. So I took the game and took it down to the other end of the field, 120, 40 yards away. and we kicked the extra point down there. Now, when we kicked off, we kicked towards that end anyway, so we avoided that. In the meantime, it gave the grounds crew in Cleveland Standing time to come pick it up. And McNally called me the next day and said, "What did you do?" I said, "I moved the game to the other end of the field. It's too dangerous for players down there where there are broken bottles and all the debris on the field." And he said, "All right, good decision." So it was something that came up at the time. I thought, I'll do it. I'm the referee. I'm supposed to do the right thing. So I think I'll do the right thing, do that.
All right. Rick Marana says, what was the most important thing to discuss in your pregame, and what were your concerns with coaches?
When I had a crew, as a referee, I'm in charge of a crew meeting when the seven of us sit down, and now with replay people and all that, sit down at the table and look at each other, and I'm looking at them. Every week we had a test to take. The league would send us a test that each of us would take it home Monday through Friday. When we came to the stadium, we had to go over that test and say, did you answer the question? Did you take time to answer all the questions? And did you study Rule 6? There's a kicking rule. We have this question, that question, and look them right in the eye and see if they really did the studying to know the rules. And assign one member of each week, send a different member to be the leader in that discussion on Rule 6, for example. Let him be the leader of the crew. And I was looking to see if they've done their homework, if they came prepared. You don't just walk in the stadium. People think you just walk in the stadium Sunday afternoon, put on a uniform, and go at the game. No. You got a lot of work to do before that. That's the easiest part of the week, is working the football game. The toughest part is studying the rules, studying mechanics, talking to each other about what happens in this play, what happens on an intercepted pass, what about a punt return, where are we? Where will you be on this punt return? I'll be over here. Where will you be? That type of thing. So knowing where the officials are on the field, if they've done their homework, that was important to me.
All right. Then our last question is from Tom Oberweiser. Where should your eyes be on any given play and as the play progresses? And that's like a 4-hour long question. So I'll let you take that and answer how you would like.
Say that one more time. I'm sure.
All right. Where your eyes should be on any given play and as the play progresses.
You missed the word eyes. Thank you very much. And that's where I had my problem. In fact, I should tell you that when I took the entrance exam to become an NFL official, I got the highest score ever recorded. I got 98 out of 100. At 100, I got 98 out of 100. I only failed on eyesight and judgment. The only two things I didn't get very well. But my eyesight as a referee, I'm standing behind the quarterback. I'm watching the snap from center. I'm watching the exchange of the ball from the center to the quarterback. Then I watch the quarterback drop back, watch his handoff, watch his pass, watch the oncoming lineman. Well, I'm focused on the quarterback a lot. If I'm downfield, I'm going to be focused on a receiver. If I'm an umpire, I'm looking at the line. As a referee, I'm looking at the line of scrimmage too. As they start their blocking, are they holding? Is it legal? Oh, I'm sorry, but you always get your eye on the field. Don't let every little player get behind you. Protect you downfield. The receiver's coming pretty fast. Back up enough so you can cover the play and keep the play in front of you the whole time.
Right. Well, Jim, I wanted to thank you very much for being such an awesome guest tonight. This is the first show I've done of Talking with Tom. You took some time out of your schedule to spend with me and talking to all of us here in Facebook land. You've been an inspiration not only to me, but to many other officials throughout the years. Do you have any parting words that you want to say to those out here watching this evening as well as me?
Well, first and foremost, Tom, it's a pleasure you asked. Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here. And I've tried to be a teacher all my life, and so I still become a teacher. And that's why I've written the books, and that's why I have a website, and that's why I do on the Tunney side of sports, a column for free every week. Just write to jim@jimtunney.com, and I'd be glad to send the column each week. Next week, I'm walking, this coming Monday, column will be about the COVID-19. Are we ready to open the country up from the COVID virus that we've had? So, but I appreciate doing that. Anytime I can be of help to you, please let me know. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
All right. To those of you out there watching tonight, in the words of Bob Porterfield from the Barter Theater in Abingdon, Virginia, if you like us, tell your friends, and if you don't, just keep your mouth shut. Hope you, your families, and friends are safe and healthy, and I wish you good night.